Captain Kim Tae-woo stood on the bridge of his cargo ship, the New Seoul, looking out at the endless stars that filled the dark space around them. The ship was not big or fancy, but it was home to him and his crew of 12 people. They had just finished a simple job delivering supplies to a small human colony on the edge of known space, and now they were heading back to Earth with empty cargo holds and tired but happy faces. The journey had been peaceful so far, just like hundreds of other trips Kim had made over the past 10 years. He was not a military man, and his ship was not built for fighting. It carried food, medicine, tools, and other things that colonies needed to survive. The New Seoul had thick metal walls and good engines, but no weapons except for a few small guns that could maybe stop pirates if they were lucky. Lieutenant Park So-young sat at her station watching the sensor screens that showed everything around their ship. She was young and smart and had joined the crew only 6 months ago because she wanted to see the galaxy. Her job was to watch for other ships, asteroids, or anything else that might be dangerous. Most of the time the screens showed nothing but empty space with distant stars twinkling like tiny lights. Engineer Choi Min-ho was down in the engine room checking the big machines that made their ship move through space. He was older than the others and had worked on ships for most of his life. His hands were always dirty with grease and oil, but he could fix almost anything that broke. He made sure their engines ran smooth and quiet so they could travel fast between the stars without problems. The other crew members were doing their normal jobs or resting in their small rooms. The ship felt calm and safe as it moved through the darkness toward home. Nobody expected what was about to happen. Nobody could have guessed that this normal day would change everything for humans across the galaxy. Park So-young suddenly sat up straight and stared at her sensor screen. Something was moving out there behind a big asteroid that floated nearby. She pressed buttons and turned dials to get a better look at whatever was hiding in the shadows. The screen flickered and then showed something that made her heart beat faster. 3 huge ships were coming out from behind the asteroid, and they were much bigger than the New Seoul. Their hulls were dark and covered with weapons that gleamed in the starlight. These were not human ships, and they were not friendly merchant vessels. They were warships built for fighting and destroying other ships. Captain Kim hurried over to look at the sensor readings. His face went pale when he saw how big the alien ships were. Each one was at least 5 times larger than his cargo vessel, and they carried enough weapons to destroy a small city. The ships had strange designs with sharp edges and spikes that made them look like giant metal monsters floating in space. The alien ships moved closer and formed a triangle around the New Seoul, trapping it like a small fish caught in a net. Their weapons turned toward the human ship, and red lights blinked on the targeting systems. Kim knew they were in terrible danger, but he tried to stay calm. For his crew, Park So-young received a message on the communication system and put it through the speakers. The sound that came out was not human. It was full of clicks and growls and harsh noises that hurt their ears. The universal translator machine worked hard to change the alien sounds into words they could understand. The voice that came through the translator was cold and mean. It demanded that the human ship surrender immediately and prepare to be boarded. The aliens said they were from the Vorthan Empire, and that humans were now their prisoners. Kim had never heard of the Vorthan Empire, but he could tell from their tone that they were used to other species giving up without a fight. General Vexstar was the commander of the alien ships, and he was pleased with how easy this capture would be. His species had been watching human transmissions for months, learning about these new creatures that had started exploring space. The Vorthans thought humans looked weak and soft like most of the other species they had conquered over the years. The Vorthan Empire was old and powerful and had enslaved dozens of different alien races across the galaxy. They were good at fighting, and their ships had better weapons and shields than most other species. When they found a new race, they would attack a small ship first to test how strong the newcomers were. Most species would surrender quickly and ask for mercy. Vexstar expected the humans to do the same thing. He thought they would beg and cry and offer to give the Vorthans whatever they wanted in exchange for their lives. This is what always happened when the Empire found a new species to conquer. The pattern was always the same: fear, surrender, and then slavery. But the Vorthans did not understand humans at all. They had watched human entertainment shows and news broadcasts, but they did not really know what humans were like when they were in danger. They thought humans were just another weak race that could be easily controlled. The alien weapons fired warning shots that lit up the space around the new Sol with bright flashes. The ship shook as the energy blasts passed close by. Kim could smell smoke and burning metal as some of the shots hit the outer hull. His engineer, Choi Min-ho, called from the engine room to report that they had damage and could not jump to hyperspace to escape. Kim looked around at his crew and saw fear in their eyes, but also something else. He saw anger and determination that the aliens would not expect. Most species in the galaxy were individuals who cared mainly about themselves, but humans were different in a way that the Vorthans could not understand. Instead of surrendering like the aliens expected, Kim did something that would change galactic history forever. He walked to a special panel on the bridge and entered a secret code that only human ship captains knew. This code would send a message across all of human space telling everyone that their people were under attack. The message was simple, but it carried a meaning that no alien species had ever encountered before. It said that humans were in danger and needed help. But more than that, it was a call that would wake up something sleeping in human civilization, something that the galaxy had never seen before. As Kim entered the final number of the code, he looked at his crew with sad but determined eyes. He knew they might not survive what was coming, but he also knew that the Vorthans had just made the biggest mistake in their long history. They had attacked humans, and humans never forgot when their people were hurt. The new Sol went dark as Kim shut down all the lights and non-essential systems. His crew prepared for the alien boarding parties that would come soon, but across human space something much more dangerous was beginning to stir. The Vorthans thought they were capturing a weak cargo ship, but they had actually awakened the fury of an entire species. General Vexstar watched the human ship go quiet and smiled with satisfaction. Another easy victory for the Empire. Soon he would have new slaves and their technology to study. He had no idea that his 3 warships were about to face something that would destroy everything he thought he knew about warfare and conquest. The trap was closing around the new Sol, but the Vorthans did not realize they were the ones who had been caught. Admiral Lee Dongmin was sitting at his desk on Earth, reading reports about fleet movements when the emergency alarm started screaming through the military headquarters. The sound was so loud and urgent that everyone in the building stopped what they were doing and looked up with worried faces. This alarm had not sounded for 20 years, and it meant only one thing: humans were under attack. The coded message from Captain Kim appeared on Lee's screen, and his blood went cold as he read the simple words: human ship attacked by unknown aliens, 12 crew members in danger. Coordinates attached. The message also contained something that made Lee's hands shake. It was a Protocol 7 activation code that had never been used in human history. Protocol 7 was the emergency plan that military leaders had created in case humans ever encountered hostile aliens. The plan was simple but terrifying. Every available human military ship would immediately head to help any humans who were under attack. It did not matter how far away they were or how dangerous the mission would be. No human would ever be abandoned. Lee pressed a red button on his desk that sent the Protocol 7 message to every human military base across 50 star systems. Within minutes, alarm bells were ringing on hundreds of worlds as soldiers ran to their ships and prepared for immediate departure. The response was so fast and so massive that it surprised even the human commanders who had planned it. Commander Yoon Ji-hai was eating lunch on her battleship, the Inchin's Pride, when the emergency message arrived. She dropped her food and ran to the bridge, shouting orders to her crew as she went. The ship's engines roared to life as her officers calculated the fastest route to reach the new Sol. Every weapon system was checked and loaded, while the crew prepared for the worst battle of their lives. What the aliens did not know was that humans had been preparing for this day ever since they first started exploring space. Human military planners had studied every known alien species and created detailed plans for fighting wars across the galaxy. They had built secret weapons and trained soldiers for battles that might never come, but now those preparations would be put to the test. The news of the attack spread through human space faster than light as communication networks carried the message to every colony and outpost. Civilian ships immediately changed course to join the rescue fleets. Even though they had no weapons and no military training, factory workers left their jobs to volunteer as crew members on the warships that were being prepared for launch. Captain Nam Hyun-si commanded a destroyer that was patrolling the outer colonies when he received the Protocol 7 message. His ship joined with 12 other military vessels to form a fast attack group that could reach the new Seoul in 2 days. Every captain in the group had the same thought: they would rather die than let fellow humans become slaves to aliens. Intelligence officer Shin A-ra worked through the night analyzing every piece of information they had about the Vorthan Empire. Her computers searched through intercepted alien communications looking for weaknesses in their ships and strategies. What she found made her smile grimly. The Vorthans had made their ships to fight other aliens who used completely different tactics than humans do. Oh Kyung-soo was a scientist who studied alien psychology and behavior. He was called to an emergency meeting with human military leaders who wanted to understand why the Vorthans had attacked. The answer he gave them was both simple and terrifying. The aliens thought humans were weak because they had never seen anything like human loyalty and determination. Most alien species in the galaxy were individuals who cared mainly about themselves. When faced with danger, they would surrender quickly to save their own lives. They could not understand why humans would risk everything to save just 12 people. To them, it seemed like madness that made no sense, but humans were different in a way that aliens could not comprehend. When one human was in danger, all humans felt that danger. When one human was threatened, all humans were threatened. This was not just emotion, it was the foundation of human civilization, and it made them more dangerous than any weapon. The Vorthans expected either immediate surrender from the cargo ship or maybe a small rescue attempt by 1 or 2 human vessels. They had no concept of what was actually heading toward them: the combined military might of an entire species that refused to abandon its own people no matter what the cost. Admiral Park Chan-woo coordinated the largest fleet movement in human history as hundreds of warships from across human space began converging on the coordinates where the new Seoul was trapped. The fleet included everything from massive battleships that could destroy planets to small fast ships that could sneak past enemy defenses. The human response was so overwhelming that it scared some of the human commanders themselves. They had created a military machine designed for total war, and now they were seeing it in action for the first time. Ships that had been built in secret shipyards were finally revealed as they joined the rescue fleets. Captain Kwon Sung-ho led a group of ships that specialized in rescuing people from hostile situations. His crews had trained for years on how to board enemy ships and save human prisoners without getting them killed. The techniques they used were based on studying alien ship designs and finding their weak points. Lieutenant Colonel Song Min-young commanded the Marine units that would actually board the alien ships and fight the Vorthan soldiers hand-to-hand. Her troops carried weapons designed specifically for fighting in the narrow corridors of spaceships, and they had trained in zero-gravity combat until they could move like dancers in space. The human fleets moved through space like a storm of metal and fire heading toward the Vorthans, who had no idea what they had unleashed. Every ship carried the same message painted on its hull in bright letters: no human left behind. These words meant more to humans than any alien could understand. Back on the new Seoul, Captain Kim and his crew could hear the Vorthan soldiers preparing to board their ship. They had barricaded themselves in the central part of the vessel and were ready to fight with whatever weapons they could find. Kim smiled grimly as he thought about the fleets that were racing to save them. The Vorthans thought they had captured an easy prize, but they were about to learn why attacking humans was the greatest mistake any species could make. They had awakened something that the galaxy had never seen before: the fury of a species that would move heaven and earth to protect its own. General Vexstar received reports that his scouts had detected some human ships heading in their direction, but the numbers seemed wrong. His officers told him that dozens of vessels were approaching, but that could not be right. No species would send so many ships to save so few people. The Vorthan general dismissed the reports as sensor errors caused by interference from the nearby asteroid field. He was confident that his 3 powerful warships could handle any small rescue attempt the humans might send. What he did not know was that the largest military fleet in galactic history was bearing down on his position, and it was filled with humans who had only one goal: bring their people home. General Vextar stood in the docking bay of his flagship as his elite soldiers prepared their weapons and armor for boarding the human cargo ship. He had done this hundreds of times before with dozens of different alien species, and it always ended the same way. The prisoners would be crying and begging for mercy within minutes of his troops entering their vessel. The Vorthan soldiers were tall and strong, with thick gray skin and sharp claws that could tear through metal. Their armor was black and covered with spikes, and their weapons could burn holes through the strongest materials. The general was proud of his troops because they had never failed to capture a ship once they boarded it. Vextar had studied the brief reports about humans that his intelligence officers had gathered from intercepted transmissions. The creatures seemed small and weak, with soft pink skin and no natural weapons like claws or fangs. They appeared to be a peaceful species that spent most of their time trading and building colonies rather than fighting wars. The boarding pods launched from the Vorthan ships and attached to the hull of the new Sol with loud clanking sounds that echoed through both vessels. The human ship was dark and quiet, as if everyone inside had given up hope and was waiting to surrender. The aliens used cutting tools to burn through the outer doors and entered the human vessel, but something was wrong from the very first moment the Vorthan soldiers stepped inside the new Sol. Instead of finding frightened prisoners cowering in the corridors, they found empty hallways that seemed too quiet. The lights were dim and shadows moved in ways that made the alien soldiers nervous, even though they would never admit it. Chief Engineer Choi Min-ho had spent the hours before the boarding turning his own ship into a fortress. He knew every pipe and wire and ventilation shaft in the vessel, and he used that knowledge to create traps that the aliens would never expect. Small explosive charges were hidden behind wall panels, and loose floor plates would give way under the weight of armored soldiers. Security Officer Bang Jun-young had only a few small weapons, but he was creative and desperate. He strung cables across doorways at neck height in the darkness and scattered sharp metal pieces on the floor where the aliens would step. The human crew had also moved all the furniture and equipment to create barriers that turned every room into a defensive position. The first Vorthan soldiers to enter the ship triggered one of Choi's explosive traps, and the blast echoed through the corridors like thunder. The aliens had expected to walk through the ship easily, but instead they found themselves fighting for every meter of progress against enemies who seemed to know their vessel better than they knew their own homes. Medical Officer Han Yu-jin was treating injured crew members in the ship's medical bay, but she had also prepared surprises for any aliens who tried to enter. Her medical supplies included chemicals that could be mixed to create smoke bombs, an acid that would eat through alien armor. She was not a soldier, but she was ready to fight like one. Communications specialist An Da-young was hiding in a maintenance shaft, sending messages to the approaching human rescue fleets. Every few minutes she would risk detection by transmitting information about the Vorthan soldiers, their weapons, and their tactics. The messages were brief, but they contained vital intelligence that would help the human Marines when they arrived. Captain Kim Tae-woo had armed himself with a plasma cutter that was normally used for repairing the ship's hull but could also cut through alien armor. He moved through the dark corridors with 3 other crew members, using their knowledge of the ship's layout to ambush the Vorthan soldiers from unexpected directions. The alien troops were confused and angry because this was not how ship boardings was supposed to go. Other species would gather in one place and surrender as soon as the Vorthans appeared, but these humans were fighting back with a determination that seemed insane. They used every dirty trick and improvised weapon they could think of. General Vextar received reports from his boarding teams that made him frown with concern. His soldiers were taking longer than expected to secure the ship, and some of them had been injured by human traps and ambush. This had never happened before, and it made him wonder if his intelligence about humans was wrong. The Vorthan troops finally cornered the human crew in the central hub of the ship, but even then the humans refused to give up. Captain Kim stood in front of his people with his makeshift weapon ready to fight while his crew prepared to make their last stand. They knew they could not win, but they were determined to make the aliens pay for every step. Vextar decided to board the ship personally to see what was taking his soldiers so long. When he entered the new Sol, he was surprised by the damage his troops had suffered. The humans had turned their own vessel into a battlefield. and they had fought with a creativity and desperation that impressed even the veteran Vorthan commander. The general found Captain Kim and his crew surrounded but still defiant. He had expected to see broken prisoners, ready to surrender, but instead he saw humans who looked ready to fight to the death. This was not normal behavior for a conquered species, and it made Vextar uncomfortable in ways he did not understand. Kim looked at the alien general and saw something in his eyes that gave him hope. The Vorthan was surprised, and maybe even a little worried about how hard the humans had fought. This meant that the aliens did not really understand what they were dealing with, and that ignorance might be the only advantage the humans had. The captain made a decision that surprised everyone, including his own crew. He lowered his weapon and told Vextar that he would surrender if the alien promised not to hurt his people. The general agreed quickly because he wanted this difficult boarding operation to be over, and he could not understand why the humans had fought so hard in the first place. But Kim's surrender was not what it appeared to be. As he walked toward the alien soldiers with his hands raised, he whispered into a hidden communicator that was still connected to the approaching human fleets. He gave them detailed information about the Vorthan ship layouts, the number of enemy soldiers, and the exact location where his crew was being held. The human rescue fleets were still hours away, but they now had intelligence that would let them plan their attack perfectly. Captain Kim had sacrificed himself and his crew to give the rescue forces every advantage they would need to defeat the aliens. The Vorthans thought they had won, but they had actually just handed the humans the keys to victory. General Vextar ordered his soldiers to move the human prisoners to his flagship, where they could be properly secured. He was pleased that the boarding operation was finally complete, but he was also troubled by how difficult it had been. These humans were different from other species, and he was beginning to suspect that his empire might have made a serious mistake. As the human crew was marched through the alien ship, they memorized everything they saw: the layout of the corridors, the location of important systems, and the number of Vorthan soldiers they encountered. This information would be transmitted to the rescue fleets as soon as they had a chance to use their hidden communicators. The Vorthans thought they had captured 12 helpless prisoners, but they had actually taken aboard 12 intelligence agents who were gathering information that would be used to destroy them. The aliens had no idea that attacking a human ship had started a chain of events that would end their empire forever. Commander Yoon Ji-hai stood on the bridge of the Inchen's Pride as her fleet dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation around the Vorthan ships. The aliens had been expecting maybe 1 or 2 rescue vessels, but instead they found themselves surrounded by 47 human warships that had appeared out of nowhere like ghosts materializing from the darkness of space. The human fleet spread out in attack formation, with the largest battleships taking positions to block any escape routes, while smaller destroyers and frigates moved in closer to engage the enemy vessels. The coordination was flawless because human military doctrine emphasized overwhelming force and rapid deployment against any threat to human lives. General Vextar stared at his sensor screens in disbelief as more and more human ships appeared around his small fleet. The numbers made no sense to him because no species in the galaxy would send such a massive force to rescue just 12 individuals. His 3 warships were suddenly outnumbered by more than 15 to 1. The Vorthan general immediately sent a message to the human fleet demanding that they withdraw or he would execute the prisoners. This was a standard tactic that had worked with other species because most aliens valued individual lives over military objectives, but the humans' response was not what he expected at all. Commander Yoon transmitted back to the Vorthan flagship with a message that was calm and cold. She told Vextar that if any humans were harmed, the entire Vorthan Empire would be destroyed and every member of his species would pay the price. The tone of her voice made it clear that this was not a threat but a simple statement of fact. Captain Kwan Sung-oh led the specialized rescue ships that had been designed specifically for hostage situations. His vessels carried advanced stealth technology that made them almost invisible to alien sensors and weapons that could disable enemy ships without destroying them completely. These ships began moving toward the Vorthan vessels, while the main fleet provided distraction. The human tactical plan was complex and had been developed through years of studying alien ship designs and defensive strategies, while the large battleships engaged the Vorthan warships in direct combat, the stealth vessels would board the enemy ships and rescue the prisoners before the aliens could. React Lieutenant Colonel Song Min-young commanded the Marine assault teams that would storm through the alien vessels once the boarding operation began. Her troops had trained for this exact scenario, and they carried weapons and equipment designed specifically for fighting inside spaceships against unknown alien enemies. The Vorthan ships opened fire first, but their weapons were designed to fight other alien vessels that used energy shields and long-range tactics the humans used. Different defensive systems, and their ships moved in patterns that confused the alien targeting computers. The human fleet absorbed the enemy fire and kept advancing. Captain Kim Tae-woo and his crew were being held in a detention cell aboard the Vorthan flagship. When they felt the ship shake from weapon impacts, they knew that their people had come for them just as they had hoped, and they began preparing to help with the rescue operation in any way they could. The rescued crew had been secretly observing the alien ship during their captivity, and they had memorized the locations of important systems and defensive positions. This intelligence was transmitted to the boarding teams through hidden communicators that the Vorthans had not found during their searches. Human boarding pods launched from the stealth ships and attached to the Vorthan vessels at multiple points simultaneously. The aliens found themselves fighting boarding actions on all three of their ships at the same time, while also trying to engage the human fleet in space combat. The human Marines cut through the alien hull plating with advanced cutting tools and poured into the Vorthan ships like a flood of armored destruction. They moved through the corridors with practiced efficiency, using tactics that had been perfected through decades of training and preparation. Song Min-young led her troops through the flagship toward the detention area, where the human prisoners were being held. The Vorthan soldiers tried to stop them, but they discovered that humans had studied every known form of ship-to-ship combat and developed counters for each one. The alien defenders found themselves facing enemies who seemed to know their ship better than they did. The rescued crew of the New Soul provided constant updates about guard positions and ship layouts, turning the battle decisively in favor of the human forces. General Vexstar watched in horror as his elite troops were systematically defeated by the human boarding parties. The aliens had superior individual weapons and armor, but the humans fought as coordinated teams that supported each other perfectly. The Vorthan soldiers were brave, but they had never faced anything like this before. The human rescue operation took less than 30 minutes from start to finish. Captain Kim and his crew were freed from their prison and evacuated to the human ships, while the Vorthan vessels suffered critical damage from the coordinated assault. All three alien warships were disabled, and their crews were taken prisoner as his flagship lost power and began drifting helplessly through space. General Vexstar realized that his species had made a terrible mistake. These humans were not the weak prey animals that Vorthan intelligence had described. They were predators disguised as merchants, and their military capabilities were beyond anything his empire had encountered. The Vorthan commander sent a desperate message to his superiors, warning them that humans were far more dangerous than anyone had realized. But his warning was transmitted on frequencies that the human fleet was monitoring, and the message gave them valuable intelligence about the Vorthan Empire and its military structure. Commander Yoon ordered her fleet to capture all the surviving Vorthans for interrogation, while her intelligence officers analyzed the alien communications and computer systems. The humans were learning everything they could about their new enemies because they knew this would not be the last battle. Captain Kim stood on the bridge of the Incheon's Pride, looking out at the wreckage of the Vorthan ships that had captured him just hours before. He thanked Commander Yoon for the rescue, but she told him that no thanks were necessary because humans never abandon their own people, no matter what the cost. The rescued crew of the New Soul provided detailed reports about Vorthan technology and tactics to the human intelligence officers. This information would be used to plan future operations against the alien empire, because the humans had already decided that the Vorthans could not be allowed to threaten any human ships. Again, Admiral Lee Dong-min received reports of the successful rescue operation, but he also knew that this was just the beginning. The Vorthan Empire would not ignore the destruction of 3 warships and the capture of their crews. they would respond with larger fleets and more aggressive tactics. The human military began preparing for a much larger conflict because they understood that the galaxy had just changed forever. The rescue of 12 crew members had revealed humanity to be a major military power, and other alien species would have to decide whether humans were friends or enemies. General Vextar was taken aboard a human ship as a prisoner, and he watched through a porthole as more human vessels arrived to join the fleet. The numbers kept growing until there were hundreds of warships surrounding the area where his ships had been destroyed. The Vorthan general finally understood the magnitude of his mistake. He had not just attacked a cargo ship, he had declared war on an entire species that was willing and able to mobilize resources on a scale that defied comprehension. The rescue fleet alone was larger than most alien military forces as the human ships prepared to return home with their rescued crew members. The galaxy was about to learn that attacking humans was not just dangerous, it was suicidal. The Vorthan Empire had awakened something that would reshape the balance of power among the stars forever. News of the Vorthan attack spread through human communication networks faster than wildfire, jumping from one colony to another across the vast distances of space. The story was simple but shocking. Aliens had attacked a human cargo ship and tried to enslave the crew, but humanity had responded with overwhelming force that surprised the entire galaxy. Ambassador Sao Jahan stood before the Galactic Council on the neutral world of Nexus Prime, holding a datapad that contained evidence of the unprovoked Vorthan assault. The council chamber was filled with representatives from dozens of alien species, all watching with growing concern as the human diplomat presented his case. The other aliens had thought they understood humans based on their peaceful trade missions and diplomatic contacts, but the rescue of the new soul revealed capabilities that no one had suspected. The human fleet that had destroyed 3 Vorthan warships was larger and more advanced than most species maintained for their entire military forces. SEO showed the council recordings from the battle that demonstrated human tactical superiority and coordination on a level that impressed even the most militaristic alien representatives. The speed and efficiency of the rescue operation suggested that humans had been preparing for interstellar warfare for much longer than anyone realized. Admiral Park Chan-Woo coordinated the largest military mobilization in human history as battle fleets assembled from every corner of human space. The response dwarfed anything the galaxy had ever seen as thousands of warships emerged from hidden bases and secret shipyards that no alien intelligence service had known existed. Factory complexes on human worlds retooled themselves overnight to produce weapons and military equipment at rates that seemed impossible to alien observers. The human industrial capacity was revealed to be far greater than their peaceful trade missions had suggested, and the implications terrified other galactic powers. Dr. Lim Hae-won was a specialist in interstellar relations who had studied alien cultures for 20 years. She was called to brief human leadership about why their response had shocked the galactic community so completely. The answer she gave them explained everything that was about to happen. Most alien species viewed warfare as a last resort to be used only when their very survival was threatened, but humans appeared to view military force as a diplomatic tool that could be deployed whenever their interests were challenged. This fundamental difference in thinking made humans unpredictable and dangerous. The Galactic Council had operated for thousands of years on the principle that conflicts between species could be resolved through negotiation and compromise, but humans seemed willing to escalate any situation to whatever level of violence was necessary to protect their people. This broke all the established rules of galactic diplomacy. Intelligence networks that had been quietly gathering information about alien civilizations for decades suddenly activated and began providing detailed tactical assessments of every major power in the galaxy. Human spies who had been living on alien worlds as traders and diplomats revealed their true identities and began sending military intelligence back to Earth. Captain Nam Hyansik received orders to lead a reconnaissance force deep into Vorthan territory to gather information about their military capabilities and defensive positions. The mission was dangerous, but the humans needed to know what they were facing. If the Vorthans decided to escalate the conflict, the reconnaissance ships used advanced stealth technology to slip past Vorthan border patrols and surveillance systems human engineers had developed, cloaking devices and sensor jammers that were far superior to anything the aliens possessed, and this technological advantage made the intelligence-gathering mission possible. What the human scouts discovered in Vorthan space shocked even their military planners. The alien empire was much larger than expected, with hundreds of worlds and thousands of warships, but their technology was outdated and their tactics were predictable. The Vorthans had conquered weaker species but had never faced a real military challenge. Lieutenant Commander Miscalculation led a team of analysts who studied the intercepted Vorthan communications and discovered that the alien empire was already showing signs of panic. The destruction of 3 warships by humans had sent shockwaves through their military command structure. The Vorthan leadership was divided between those who wanted to launch an immediate massive attack on human space and those who thought they should try to negotiate a peace settlement before the situation got worse. The debate was tearing their government apart because they had never faced an enemy who could match their military strength. Human colonies that had been peaceful trading outposts just weeks before were transformed into heavily fortified military bases as defense fleets took up positions throughout human space. The civilian population supported the military buildup because they understood that the attack on the New Sol was just the beginning. Civilian ships volunteered to serve as supply vessels and troop transports for the military fleets, while retired veterans came out of retirement to serve as instructors and advisors. The entire human species was mobilizing for war in a way that no alien civilization had ever witnessed. The economic impact of the military mobilization was staggering as human worlds shifted from civilian production to military manufacturing. Shipyards that had been building cargo vessels and passenger ships began producing destroyers and battleships, while factories that made consumer goods started making weapons and armor. Dro. Kyung-soo studied the psychological profiles of captured Vorthan soldiers and discovered something that would change human strategy. The aliens were not inherently evil or aggressive, but they had been conditioned by centuries of easy victories against weaker species to believe that they were naturally superior. The Vorthan Empire had built its identity around the conquest of other races, and the idea that they might face defeat by a species they had considered inferior was causing a crisis of confidence throughout their civilization. Their entire worldview was being challenged by the human response. Communication intercepts revealed that other alien empires were watching the developing conflict with great interest. Some species were considering alliance with the humans, while others were discussing whether they should attack human space. While the fleets were focused on the Vorthans, the Nexian Federation sent a secret envoy to meet with Ambassador Seo to discuss the possibility of a mutual defense treaty. The Nexians had been rivals of the Vorthan Empire for centuries but had never been strong enough to challenge them directly. The human military demonstration had changed their calculations completely. General Zeth Cole of the Nexian military admitted to SEO that his species had seriously underestimated human capabilities and that they were now reconsidering their entire approach to galactic politics. The humans had revealed themselves to be a potential superpower that could tip the balance of power in any direction they chose. The galactic economy began to shift as trade routes that had been dominated by Vorthan merchants were abandoned in favor of paths that avoided their territory. Human traders found themselves welcomed at ports that had previously been closed to them as alien species sought to build relationships with the new power. News broadcasts on alien worlds showed footage of human fleets and speculated about what this meant for the future of galactic civilization. Some commentators warned that humans might become the next great conquering empire, while others suggested that they might bring stability to a galaxy that had been plagued by conflicts. The transformation of humanity from a minor trading partner to a major military power happened so quickly that it destabilized the existing order throughout known space. Every species had to recalculate their diplomatic and military strategies based on the new reality that humans were not just another member of the galactic community. Captain Kim Tae-woo became a symbol throughout human space, representing the principle that no human would ever be abandoned regardless of the cost or consequences. The crew of the New Sol were treated as heroes, but they knew that their rescue had changed everything for their species. The galaxy had entered a new era where the simple act of threatening a human ship could trigger responses that might topple entire governments and reshape the balance of power among the stars. The Vorthons had learned too late that they had attacked the wrong species. 6 months after the attack on the New Sol, the Vorthon Empire had been completely destroyed by human military forces. Their homeworlds were under human occupation, their fleets were scattered wreckage floating in space, and their surviving leaders were facing trial for crimes against humanity. The speed and thoroughness of the human response had shocked every civilization in the galaxy. Captain Kim Tae-woo stood on the observation deck of Earth's orbital station looking down at his homeworld, which had become the unofficial capital of a new galactic order. His rescue had triggered the largest military campaign in galactic history, and now humanity was recognized as the dominant power among the stars. The transformation had not been easy or without cost. The war against the Vorthons had lasted only 4 months, but it had required the mobilization of every human resource and the sacrifice of thousands of lives. Human colonies that had been peaceful trading posts were now heavily fortified military bases surrounded by defense fleet trade routes that had once carried civilian cargo, now bristled with escort fleets ready to respond to any threat against human vessels. The galaxy had learned that attacking a human ship brought consequences that were swift, terrible, and complete. Other species began going out of their way to avoid any conflict with human interests. Admiral Lee Dong-min reviewed the final reports from the Vorthon campaign while planning for the future challenges that humanity would face. The war had revealed both human strengths and the dangers of being seen as the galaxy's new superpower. Every species was now deciding whether to seek alliance with humans or to band together against them. The Nexian Federation had been the first to request a formal alliance with humanity, and their example was followed by dozens of smaller species that wanted protection from the chaos that had followed the collapse of Vorthon power. General Zethkol worked closely with human military advisors to modernize his forces using human technology and tactics. Ambassador Sao Jae-hyun found himself at the center of a new diplomatic order, as species that had ignored humanity for decades now sought meetings and treaties. The human embassy on Nexus Prime became the most important building on the planet as alien representatives waited in line to speak with human officials. The economic impact of the war had been enormous, but it had also demonstrated human industrial capacity in ways that impressed and frightened other civilizations. Human shipyards were producing new vessels at rates that seemed impossible, while human factories supplied not only their own military but also the defense forces of their new allies. Dr. Lim Hae-won studied the psychological impact of the human victory on other galactic civilizations and found that it had fundamentally changed how aliens viewed warfare and diplomacy. The old assumptions about negotiation and compromise had been replaced by fear of what humans might do if their interests were threatened. The Galactic Council had been reorganized with humans holding a permanent seat and veto power over any decisions that affected human interests. The other species had agreed to this arrangement not out of respect but out of recognition that humans could enforce their will with military power if necessary. Captain Nam Hyun-sik commanded one of the new patrol fleets that monitored the former Vorthon territory, ensuring that no remnant forces could regroup and threaten human shipping. The patrols also served as a reminder to other species that humans were now watching everything that happened in this part of the galaxy. The rescued crew of the New Sol had become symbols throughout human space, representing the principle that no human life was expendable. They traveled to colonies and military bases, telling their story and reinforcing the message that humanity would go to any lengths to protect its own people. Engineer Choi Min-ho designed new defensive systems for civilian ships based on the lessons learned during the boarding of his vessel. Human cargo ships now carried weapons and armor that would allow them to fight off raiders while calling for help from the nearest military patrol. Lieutenant Park So-young became an instructor at the military academy, teaching young officers about sensor operations and early warning systems. Her experience detecting the Vorthon ambush had been studied and incorporated into standard procedures for all human vessels operating in dangerous areas. The Vorthon survivors who had been captured during the war were being held in prison. camps while human authorities decided what to do with them. Some officials wanted to execute them as an example to other species, while others argued that showing mercy would demonstrate human superiority. General Vextar spent his days in a prison cell on a human world writing memoirs that would never be published. He had come to understand that his attack on the new soul had not been a minor incident, but the spark that ignited a galactic revolution. His empire had been destroyed because they had misunderstood what humans were capable of. The psychological impact on the Vorthon people had been devastating as their entire worldview collapsed. Their species had defined itself through military conquest, but they had been conquered by beings they had considered inferior. The shame and confusion would take generations to heal. Other alien empires studied the human victory and tried to understand how such a rapid and complete conquest had been possible. The answer was disturbing because it suggested that humans had been preparing for large-scale warfare much longer than anyone had realized. Human colonies that had seemed defenseless now revealed hidden weapons and fortifications that had been built in secret over many years. The peaceful traders and diplomats had been gathering intelligence and preparing for conflicts that other species had never imagined. The galaxy's balance of power had shifted so dramatically that old alliances and rivalries became meaningless. Species that had been enemies for centuries now cooperated to avoid attracting human attention, while former allies found themselves on opposite sides of the new order. Communication networks that had once carried peaceful trade negotiations now buzzed with military traffic as species tried to determine human intentions and capabilities. The uncertainty was almost as destabilizing as the war itself because no one knew what humans might do next. Dro Kyung-soo published a study of human psychology that became required reading for alien diplomats throughout the galaxy. His analysis explained why humans were willing to escalate conflicts to levels that other species found incomprehensible, and why this made them so dangerous. The study revealed that humans did not view individual lives as expendable resources the way most aliens did, but instead saw each person as irreplaceable. This meant that any threat to human lives would provoke responses that seemed disproportionate to other species but were perfectly logical from the human perspective. Captain Kim returned to space as the commander of a new class of exploration vessel designed to carry human civilization to distant parts of the galaxy. His ship was heavily armed and escorted by military vessels because humanity was no longer content to explore peacefully. The new soul had been rebuilt and renamed the Liberation to commemorate the war that had followed its capture. The ship now served as a mobile monument to human determination and a warning to any species that might consider threatening human interests. Human space had expanded dramatically as colonies were established on worlds that had been abandoned by fleeing Vorthon settlers. The new territories were heavily defended and served as bases for further expansion into unexplored regions of the galaxy. The message